to the What the Falk Sunderland preview show in association with Viper Goalkeeping. Sunderland had apparently been away for 6 months when they returned for Saturday's 1-1 draw against Bristol Rovers, but in truth, it was almost like they had never been away at all, given the quality of performance. And our next opponents are a club that I actually tipped to win the league, and to chat about why I may be wrong, or chat about why I may be right, is Si from Oxford's Fence End Pod. First and foremost, how are you doing, Si? You all right?
Yeah, I'm good, thank you. You? Are you well?
Yeah, getting by. You know, it was nice to have football back, but like, as I said in the intro, Sunderland, and I'm sure many Sunderland fans listening to this will tell you, it literally felt like we'd never been away because we were shite, for want of a better word. But we actually spoke a little bit before the start of the season, before Saturday's game, and I think we both agreed that I think Oxford should be there or thereabouts. Like I said before, I've kind of actually tipped you to win the league. I don't really know why. I just think probably it's going to be a team that maybe some people would expect, but a team that would be there or thereabouts. The mood is positive at Oxford. The team's very different to Sunderland. But then you go into the season and you lose 2-0 at Lincoln. So how have the fans reacted to the result?
Well, we kind of went from sort of 5-3 on Saturday. It was, hashtag announced promotion. And then at 4:45, it was relegation. We're going down if we don't get players. Typical football fans, in that we go from one extreme to the other. But I think with a lot of clubs, we haven't finalised the squad yet. I think there's players to come in and out, and it's way too early to say. But I think it was perhaps a little wake up call that we can't just expect to go into teams like Lincoln, who we beat 6-1, 6-0 last season, best away performance ever. We were exceptional that day, and to go there at the start of this season, and they did a job on us. So I think it's kind of just sort of dampened the expectation a little bit, which is no bad thing for everyone, I think.
Yeah, no, I suppose it's a grounder a little bit, because I think Sunderland had gone a little bit more positive than what it had been, but that's probably due to the fact that you're away for so long now. I'll probably bring up a sore point for both of us, a team that begins with W and ends in E, Wycombe, for those who haven't clicked on what I'm on about. I obviously watched the playoff final. I think Sunderland fans and probably Peterborough fans more so have their own grievances with Wycombe, but I remember watching the game and I remember feeling a little bit like Oxford were far the better team. It was totally against the run of play. I watched the Portsmouth games, which gave me great joy because Sunderland and Portsmouth have had an awful lot of tittle-tattle over the past few seasons. So to me, I thought you were the best side within the playoffs, and I think you wanted the best side throughout the season. Is that where a lot of the positivity came from, the fact that you were excruciatingly unlucky against Wycombe, if we're honest?
Yeah, that playoff final came down to a couple of moments, really. The first goal, it was a set piece that we just didn't deal with, and then the second one was a long ball down the middle. It looked like there potentially could have been a throw in just before that. Didn't happen. Ball down the middle, and our centre half, who's been heading balls all season, I guess gets a call and ducks out of it. And it shows you how fine the margins are in any football match. We all know we can look back on results and games and identify little moments. But I think there seemed to be amongst the players a real determination to put things right. Cameron Brannigan, one of the players that we were perhaps thinking might go on, move on in the summer, signed an extension on his contract. And one of the things he said was, I want to put right what we didn't do in the playoffs. We want to take it that one step further. So I think there's a determination amongst the players to do that, and hopefully we will see that. There'll be a real kind of effort to put things right that went wrong in the playoffs. Perhaps let's not go through the playoffs. Let's get it done automatically. Yeah,
absolutely. When it comes to the last season, obviously we played each other really early last season and we drew 1-1, as 9 times out of 10 we always seem to. Yeah. I think 4 out of 5 games have been 1-1, a Jaguars' favourite scoreline. If I remember correctly, I was relatively pleased we got Oxford first game of the season last season, thinking, right, that's a good game, it's a winnable game. And he came down and probably got a deserved point. I know we went down later on in the season and got a 1-0 win, but I think Oxford ended up being, like I said before, one of the better sides in the league and probably unlucky not to go up. Going into last season, were you expectant of you to be that high up and that close to promotion?
I think most fans were hoping for a playoff place. So if you depends who you believe when it comes to budgets, but I think we kind of over achieved where budgets were concerned. But I think there was perhaps a hope or an expectation that playoffs were where we should be aiming for. You know, he was backed in the transfer market. We brought players in. You know, we got some decent loan players in, and I think, yeah, there was an expectation that we would do something that, you know, last season.
Yeah, because I remember, like, it wasn't that long after that particular game you did start emerging as contenders, and never really fell out of it, apart from that period when you lost, obviously, Fosu and whatnot. But I think that was more down to injuries. I think from the outside looking in, it looked like you lost 2 players and that was it. But I think it was more along the lines of you had more injuries, and that coincided with the players you were selling, wasn't it?
Yeah, we had a February. We played Saturday, Tuesday throughout February, 9 games in 28 days in February, cup games, cup replays, all sorts of stuff. And we were kind of not strong. We did well to get through that period and still be there or thereabouts. And then through February and into March before the lockdown, we won 5 on the trot and we're looking like the form team. I know, you know, Peterborough were saying pretty much the same thing, that if the season had gone on, they would be they were hoping for a promotion. But
yeah,
you know, we'd won 5 on the trot. We were, I think, a point behind Rotherham. We still had them to play at home, I think. So there was a momentum growing. And you kind of think maybe if the season had gone on, it would have suited us, because the kind of style of football we play is quite intricate. You know, we want to try and play decent football, and that sometimes takes a while to gel. And we just looked in the playoff games, we never quite got to the high standards we were at before lockdown, and it took us a while to get going. And that might be the same thing that's happening now with the game at Lincoln. We might just take a little while to get back into the rhythm of the style of football we try and play.
Before I move away from sort of last season, because obviously that's it feels like we've never really been away, but we've also been away ages. It's kind of odd. We sat and watched. We plugged in the laptop and watched the stream against Hull in the Carabao Cup, and then obviously Bristol Rovers on Saturday, and I can't get used to it. I hate it. I can't stand it, like, because I like throwing my arms about, I like hugging people, and at the minute that's the one thing that the whole world can't do. But I spoke to a Hull fan, and then obviously I'm speaking to an Oxford fan just now, but I think your situation is obviously slightly different to the way Hull was when you're watching the stream. You've got a little bit more experience of watching big, competitive, meaningful games on a stream.
Yeah.
Straightforward question would be, what is it like getting to Wembley, not being able to go and watching it through the medium of the internet?
Yeah, it was tough. I was kind of, I don't know whether you say lucky or unlucky. I'm involved with one of the fans groups at Oxford, and we went up to Wembley and set the flags out. So we kind of had that moment at Wembley, you know, but that also kind of reinforced how much we were going to miss it, because you stood there putting the flags out and then having to go home and watch it on telly the next day, and it's a horrible feeling to, especially. I mean, you're right. There's a lot about football that you can't get the emotion watching it on a screen. It just doesn't happen, and especially being at Wembley, you know, for a lot of fans, myself included, you know, I've been, every time we've been at Wembley, I've been. Milk Cup back in the 80s and sort of conference playoffs, all of that sort of stuff. So to miss out on a trip to Wembley for us, it's been tough. And I don't know. You can certainly get into games on the telly as much because it's your team. Of
course,
you know, I watch the big games, the Champions Leagues in England and stuff like that. And you kind of get into it, but I think even you can't get into it as much as being there, obviously, and it's going to be tough. Although I see today they've announced there might be some small. I think they were looking at 1,000 fans into games as from possibly this weekend.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, like you say, I feel very privileged myself because I work with Middlesbrough Women, which I think a lot of people know, and we can have 30% of our crowd in because of the level that we're in, which is basically about 300 people maximum. But it still feels a bit weird because we have to tell people not to shout and we have to tell people to wear masks and things like that. And it's a bit like, if you have to do that, is it taking the fun away from it? But it's just the way the world is, I guess. But it's an interesting concept that I had a whole fan on, and I asked him what it was like to watch a team relegated on the TV over the course of 7 games. So on the flip side, what's it like to see a team win a penalty shootout but then get to Wembley not able to be there? It just seems a bit odd. But onto sort of this season, I could be wrong because Google often can be wrong, believe it or not. But it looked like you went with on Saturday a 4-3-3. So not a great deal of change from last year, but did the style of play, formation look the same as last season, or has Robinson tweaked a few things?
No, it was pretty much as we were last season. You're right, that 4-3-3 with one up front, and the 2 wider players dropping back when they needed to. We lost Rob Dickie, the centre half and captain, in the summer. He went to QPR, and one of the sort of standout things that one of our fans had identified, I think, up until over the last sort of 2 or 3 seasons, the number of appearances for our centre halves hasn't dropped below 100. It's been usually up around about the 300 league appearance mark. And on Saturday, Rob Atkinson was making his league debut for us, and in entirety. And Elliot Moore, who was the other centre half, has played 15 games. So it's all of a sudden we've got quite an inexperienced centre half pairing, which I think that's going to take a while to bed in. But the formation and the way we played, and to be fair, Rob Atkinson is quite similar in style to Rob Dickie. Obviously not as experienced, but the way he tries to carry the ball out is quite similar. A lot of the players are the same as last season. We pretty much played the same way. It just didn't quite work for us.
With Atkinson, he got sent off on Saturday. We had Dobson sent off on Saturday, which many people would be pleased about, unfortunately for him. But he definitely misses Saturday because we haven't had a game in between. Now, we're speaking before, obviously, the EFL game that you have tonight, which is Tuesday. Yeah. Is he suspended for that game and not Saturday then?
He's not suspended at all. They appealed the red card and it was overturned. And a lot of fans looked at it and thought, well, I think it was a foul, definitely. But it looked like possibly a yellow card, certainly not a red card. It didn't look reckless, as has been proved by the fact it was overturned.
Yeah.
If he'd have received a second yellow, which nobody would have complained about, he would have been suspended because it'd have been a second yellow and therefore a red. Weirdly, it worked out well that he got a straight red, which we've appealed, and now he can play. I don't think he's going to play tonight necessarily, but he'll be available to play on Saturday. And you're right, I saw just the highlights of your guy against them. Very similar incidents. They were kind of stretching for a ball, kind of from the side. It didn't look nasty. It was controlled. And we've appealed red cards in the past and never got anywhere. So nobody was expecting anything from it. And then all of a sudden it's like, well, I suppose 2020 has been a weird year, so we're getting the rub of the green with appealing red cards.
Remember, we once appealed Michael. Well, everyone will remember this. We once appealed Michael Turner's red card. It was never an elbow, and I remember this is 10 years ago, and it was against Man City when we were in the Premier League, and Michael Turner didn't just get it thrown out. It was never a red card. Never, ever, ever. Total accidental, hitting the guy nutted his elbow. I think it was Gareth Barry. And because we appealed it and they said no, he definitely was a vicious elbow, we got an extra game on top. So yeah, it would be, but I don't think we appealed Dobson's red card, which, like I say, I think a lot of Sunderland fans will be happy with. I have a different opinion on that, but I better not say anything because I'll get in trouble, as Jose would say. Rob Dickie you touched on. For me, looking through, I did League One preview show with James from D3D4, obviously an Oxford fan as well, and he spoke at length about Rob Dickie. Probably one of the best centre-halves in the league, if not the best last year, and I don't think I'm overestimating him by saying that. And I hope there's no QPR fans listening. I'm not saying you're a small club. I'm not saying you're rubbish. I'm certainly not saying that. But I've got to imagine if you're selling your best player and he goes to QPR, it feels a little bit shite.
Yeah, I kind of agree with you. Same thing, we are where we are. We're a League One club. They're a Championship club. Fair enough. Yeah. But you're right. There seems to be a kind of he could have done better than that. He's a really talented footballer. Yeah. He's got something that a lot of centre halves don't. Carry the ball out. But we call him Virgil van Dickie. He's got that kind of similar. He's a big, powerful guy. He can carry the ball. He's a very, very good footballer. And you're right. No disrespect to QPR. They'll probably look at us and we're a hell of a lot smaller than us. We're all of that. Yeah, you kind of felt there was a a real step up for him. You know, as it is, he's kind of gone one step, and you kind of felt he had the ability to go lower Premier League, you know, somewhere like, I don't know, Burnley, that kind of level. You felt he would be very comfortable at.
Because you had, and his name completely escapes me for some bizarre reason, that the lad from Portsmouth a couple of seasons ago, God, his name completely escapes me. Centre half, played next to Burgess, and he went to, I think it was, he went to a Premier League club, and then he went on loan to Derby, and I sort of seen Dickie, Matt Clark, that was it, Clark, it was Clark, and he went to a Premiership side and then dropped down, I think it was to Derby for the season. And I kind of saw Rob Dickie maybe doing that, maybe going to someone, I don't know, someone similar to, I don't know, if Bournemouth, somewhere like that, even top end Championship, and maybe playing somewhere like that, or going to the Premiership and going on loan. And again, it's like, I can't say anything to QPR because they're a division above, and they have a manager that does like to play out from the back. Obviously, Warburton was at Rangers and was an awful lot like that, but it did feel a bit like, QPR. And it was just a bit like, oh, right, okay. But for me, your best player, and has been for numerous seasons, someone you touched on before, was Cameron Brannigan. Obviously came through Liverpool. He's been huge for Oxford the past few years, and someone who, to be honest with you, is probably a kind of player Sunderland are missing. Someone in the middle that can actually dictate a game and do something. He's just signed a new contract, but as we know, contracts don't mean that much these days. So how confident are you of keeping hold of him up until, well, October, I think it is, the transfer window ends now?
Yeah, I think we will keep hold of him. It's a slightly similar situation, I suppose, with Rob Dickie. Maybe QPR were the only team that came in for him with a genuine offer. So that's you know, and with Brannigan, I don't think anyone's made an offer for him. So, you know, he comes across as quite a thought. He's a young lad, but certainly having seen interviews with him and kind of knowing the kind of guy he is, you know, he apparently sort of through the summer he spent most of it fishing. You know, he's not off, you know, somewhere in Ibiza giving it large. He's quite a thoughtful guy, and him, if he sticks around, I think his intensity will rub off on players, and he will be important for us. You know, when he plays well, we play well, and you know, I'm sure we'll touch on it later. Sort of in dangerous players and that kind of thing. If you can nullify him, then we've got players around him this season. Liam Kelly, who came in on loan last year, and Marcus Maguire, who we've got on loan from Forest, who started at Arsenal, went to Barcelona, and has come back via Forest to us on loan. He looks good. So maybe those players will take a little bit of the pressure off Brannigan, and he can play a little bit, you know, knowing that in the past perhaps he has been targeted because he really is the playmaker, but with a couple of other players around him who can also play a bit, he might get a bit of space and really thrive. But he will be important this season, and touch wood, he will stick around. He definitely said when he signed the new contract that was something he wanted to put right. You know, he appreciated the fact we gave him first team football, gave him a chance, and he wants to replay that. And it's kind of admirable because he could well have, you know, I think Leeds were looking at him last season, so there's definitely interest in him. He's a decent player.
Looking at Rob Dickie, I think he went, you'll know this better than me, but it was about 1.3, I think, that you got for him.
Yeah, there's lots of, I've seen sort of 2, maybe raising to 2.5. It's undisclosed. So
undisclosed always, isn't it?
There's lots of figures flying around. But I think that kind of 1.5 to 2 to 2.5 with add-ons and stuff is about right.
And it's funny with League One because obviously this is now our third year, so you look at who's coming in where, and it's all free transfers here and there with the occasional big move going elsewhere. Last year, I think a Sunderland fan mentioned that Brannigan would have been a great player to bring in, and estimated cost, you know, maybe 500,000 bid or something like that. And I've seen loads of Oxford fans kicking off royally at this, and it made me think it's funny how much you estimate your own players at because you watch them every week, you know the value. So if Brannigan was to come in, how much would and someone was to come in for him, how much would Oxford fans want from, like, realistically?
I think what we want from him and being realistic aren't necessarily the same.
Well, yes,
you know, he signed a new contract, and you kind of think, okay, as you know, goalkeepers don't go for as much as defenders, as much as midfielders, and Ivan Toney's gone for maybe 6 million. They're looking at that kind of thing. I think as you go further forward, players tend to get a bit more expensive, and but I think that he's a young player. He's 23, 24, that sort of age, getting towards his peak. And I think you'd hope with the length of contract he's now signed that if it was in this transfer window or maybe in January's transfer window, that a similar feat to Rob Dickie, you'd hope for that kind of getting towards a couple of million for him. But then football's in a weird situation at the moment, and I think we've got to temper what we expect to get for him. That a lot of clubs are struggling financially, so it's going to be a very different transfer window.
The thing I quite like about Oxford, though, and you'll be able to kind of set me right on this, the big problem that Sunderland fans have found for a long, long time is recruitment. And I'm talking from the Premiership days. I could go on and do probably an hour, 2 hour long podcast based on the mistakes that they were made in Sunderland's recruitment. And it hasn't really fixed, despite wherever we've been. You look at Oxford, across the side, you seem to pick up a lot of players either from a couple of divisions above, or academy players, Brannigan being one of them, and then make them into players that can mould into a specific team. But it looks like Robinson or your recruitment team, whoever it is that brings players in, look at like characteristics and probably do that sort of statistical thing. I think Dave Jones, obviously, who is part of Oxford as well, he's talked an awful lot about that as a non-executive director, about bringing in players based on like statistical analysis. And we brought in a player called Bennett Jamali, I think is the pronunciation. And a lot of that was based on like stats and things like that, or so I'm led to believe. With the signings that Oxford bring in, does a lot of effort go into not so much like the name of the player you bring in and stuff like that, but the statistics you can get and kind of what they bring to the team and how much resale value they may have?
Yeah, definitely. There was a BT program during last season, I think, called Mic'd Up or Unmiked or something like that, where they went and spent a day at Oxford's training ground chatting to Carl Robinson. And at one point, they had like a whiteboard or a digital board up with, they'd identified 2 or 3 players for every position. And it wasn't just a case of, oh, we've seen him play well, he'll do. They'd looked into absolutely everything about them, statistics, pace, what they, the distance they ran in a game. But they kind of looked deeper than that as well, and were looking at, were they married? What was their social media like? Did what were they like as people? Would they fit in with the group? And I think there's a huge amount that goes into the recruitment. And you're right, we're picking up, we did it under Appleton and the previous chairman, where we looked at people like Kemar Roof came to us, when we were in League Two, who's now gone on and done brilliantly and now at Rangers. John Lundstrom's another one who's playing for Sheffield United and doing well. George Baldock we had on loan, slightly different, but we had him on loan and he's, we identified him as a player that could do something. So there's, and who else? Joe Rothwell has gone. Ryan Ledson has gone to Championship clubs. So we've gone from in the past picking up players towards the end of their careers or non-leaguers, and picking up now younger players with a point to prove. And I think that's a real sort of positive. Brentford are doing it really well. Looking at not the obvious targets. They're picking up players from slightly odd places and if they do well and you get promotion with them, great. But if you don't and they play well, they're going to go on and you're going to get money for them. It's a trading model that seems to be working.
I find it, because Sunderland fans would much rather be like that. I mean, I don't speak for everyone, but the general feeling is that that's what we would prefer and we want to sign players. And there's been a couple of instances of that happening. I mean, in essence, it hasn't probably worked out, but George Dobson was one. He'd been at Arsenal, he'd been at West Ham, he'd been captain of Walsall, he's 21. That idea was he plays well, he comes in, he's got some resale value. So far, that one hasn't really worked. Bennett Jamali looks like that might be more along the lines of what Dave Jones has talked about bringing in. But then on the flip side, a move that I actually backed, but we brought in Danny Graham, age of 35, and sometimes someone said, if he scores enough goals to get us up, it's been a good move. And yeah, I agree with that. But at the same time, what happens when he's in 36 and win the championship? Do we then have to spend big? And sometimes Sunderland's recruitment can feel very short-sighted. Do you think that's the benefit of being a side like Oxford or, a side like Brentford, where in the past, maybe your budget hasn't been that huge, so you've been forced to go down that route, and in the long run, it's benefiting you?
Yeah, and perhaps, with yourselves coming down from the Premier League and having recognisable names, whereas we've kind of in a similar period of time, we've been down in the conference and come up. You're not going to attract big names. We've signed players in this sort of transfer window that you've kind of got to do a bit of research to know exactly who they are. Because they're not names that you'd immediately identify. And I guess we're in the same division, but Sunderland obviously a much bigger club historically, fan base, infrastructure, all of that sort of stuff. So perhaps there is that, and being in the Premier League so recently, there's perhaps an expectation that you should be signing names rather than. But it doesn't always work. It's. I think you've proved it over the last couple of seasons. I'm sure there's players you could reel off who came in, as recognisable names, just failed.
Yeah.
And I think there's at this level as well. It's not what you spend. We'll perhaps talk about Wickham proved that. Much as I hate to say it and give them credit, they worked on a tiny budget, but they showed that with a tight group of players and a way of playing that they all bought into, with a manager, whether you like him or hate him, he comes across a bit of a whatever. he had them absolutely behind him. He got them playing for him, and it worked. And at this level, you can do it. I think they'll perhaps struggle in the Championship because the quality is a little bit higher, and I think I saw a stat. Their game on Saturday was the lowest time that a ball was in play in Championship history since they've been timing it, which is what they do. They don't play for very long. What they do is kind of go from set piece to set piece and put pressure on you and work hard. But when the ball's out of play, they're in no rush to get it back in play. So it's kind of high intensity when it's playing. But you'll probably expect a style of play from Sunderland, same as Oxford. We wouldn't put up with that. But at a smaller club, it's going to work for you.
Yeah, it's funny with Wickham. It's like they went up, but I think. I mean, there was a few bad teams, and I'd probably say Rochdale were the worst, but we were like 4-0 up or something, or 3-0 up against Wickham within about 20 minutes at home. They were terrible, and when their game plan went out the window, they were awful, but annoyingly, it worked like 9 times out of 10 for them, and it was kind of their way of playing, and pod and puck at it as much as you want, and I know they've had, in my opinion, a bit of a leg up with what happened and stuff like that, but they still were like in there with a chance, which no one would have guessed with Wickham. I think a lot of people guessed that they would sort of go down. In terms of sort of transfers and recruitment, I was looking through the players that you'd brought in, and you mentioned a couple, obviously, Marcus McGuinn's a great signing from Forest. You've also brought in, of course, Liam Kelly, who you've got experience of and is highly rated. Sean Clares came in from Hearts. There's a few more as well, but what's your initial impressions of the new recruits? Which ones have stood out so far?
Yeah, the ones you mentioned are kind of the ones that are expected to be in and around the first team. A couple of others that were perhaps ones for the future. And yeah, I think Liam Kelly is one that when he signed, I think a lot of fans thought, well, maybe that's a sign that Brannigan's going to go out now, because they're kind of similar sorts of player physically, and they'll both dictate play. They'll pick the ball up from the centre halves and play out. And it was a bit of a surprise when he signed, and then Brannigan signed a contract extension. So they're quite similar players. But yeah, McGuire looks like one who's, again, it's that kind of something to prove. He's stepped down to a level that's perhaps beneath him, but actually he needs to prove that it's beneath him by performing. Getting Matt Taylor on a permanent was a big thing for us. He's a local lad. He played for us as a youngster, and he's what we need as just a goal scorer. I think there's a couple of places we could do with strengthening. Probably down the left side, we need some cover, and Josh Ruffles, who's the left back, got injured on Saturday, so we're a bit sort of weak there, and I think a sort of a left winger, quick pacey left winger is something we perhaps need. But we've signed Sam Winnell this week, or earlier this week, or last week, who's a bit of experience up front, because
Proving it
with Jamie Mackey retiring. He was that kind of player that you'd bring on and you'd annoy centre halves for 15 minutes at the end of the game, but he kind of wind the clock down. And I think Sam Winnall's another one of those players with a bit of experience that if he needs to come on or start games, there's no sort of worry that he's going to struggle or be a little bit out of his depth. He's a player at this level that will score a lot of goals, I hope.
Yeah. I mean, he's been linked to us a couple of times, and I mean, it's not something that warms your cockles and gets you mad excited, but it's League One. He's someone who's going to do a job for you, much like Mackie did last season. He can't be as good as TikTok though as Jimmy Mackie was last year. I very rarely like talking about Sunderland on the preview podcast, because mainly it's to get an idea of what's going on at your club and get a feel of who we're coming up against on Saturday. But there's something we share in common, and I'm very, very curious to see what the thoughts are. I think the long story short is the relationship with Stewart Donald and definitely with Charlie Methven has fallen to pieces from doing podcasts and being all over the shop and being very vocal. And since we didn't get promoted in the first season, let's just say cracks have appeared for numerous different reasons, but they're both widely known as big, massive Oxford fans and have been involved in part with Oxford. You've probably seen Sunderland Till I Die. Unfortunately, you might have seen my ugly mug in it for about 4 minutes at some point. But I'm very curious as to what Oxford fans think of Stewart and Charlie and how you perceive them maybe now and also when they were involved with your club.
I mean, I think there's perhaps they're seen as quite different characters. Although they are very different characters, and Stewart is somebody who's been very supportive of the club. Charlie's been involved, as a supporter around the club for a long time as well. And it's interesting. Obviously, Charlie's background is in PR, and it's something the marketing and stuff that went on at Sunderland. Got quite a lot of the headlines and that sort of stuff, and it's something we've talked about on the podcast that I do. Nothing to do with Charlie, more sort of the marketing and around the club, and how if stuff's going well on the field, marketing it is relatively straightforward, because you could do a brilliant marketing plan with some great ideas, but if the team aren't winning, it just doesn't work. And I think there's a risk that results or how the marketing is sort of perceived relies so heavily on how the club are doing, and that's something that obviously didn't happen and didn't work for Sunderland. There's some big name signings and it was talked up. Certainly Charlie talked it up and talked about 100-point seasons and all that sort of stuff, and it's like, well, don't talk about it, do it. Don't say how wonderful it's going to be. Hold your counsel, get out there, start winning games, then get on the back of that and say, look, we're winning games, we're doing everything we can as a club, come and support us. Not the other way around. It shouldn't be the other way around. The team drives that kind of it builds such a positive atmosphere around the club, and if you're not successful and you're saying all sorts of stuff, then it really doesn't work. And I think Charlie's upset a lot of people on our fans forum, sort of I'm sure we'll see him at Oxford and Stewart as well. They're fans of the club, so they'll as and when their ownership of Sunderland kind of ends, because it will, like every ownership ends at some point.
Sure.
They'll be back at Oxford watching us. But no, happy with the ownership we've got at the moment. Stewart and Charlie on a couple of occasions nearly sort of bought into the club, Stewart's money, that kind of thing, and it didn't happen. And a lot of fans, because they were fans, were, well, why have we got the other guys in? We should be getting those in. But if you look back at who with Darryl Eales and Mark Ashton buying into the club and bringing Michael Appleton in, that was a success. They came in League Two. We're now in League One. We had a couple of good cup runs in JPT with them. And now with Tiger and the money that's behind him, the sort of Indonesian money, we're taking a step from being a sort of middling League One club to good cup runs, well run, good business model, and pushing towards the top end of League One. So it's kind of, those results speak for themselves. I think we're doing pretty well with the ownership we've got, and I think there's always a risk as a fan owning a club. You perhaps make decisions with the heart rather than the head, and that's not always the right way of doing it.
If you've watched the episode when we signed Will Grigg, you'll see that Stewart definitely lets his heart rule his head, and obviously his bank balance. It's funny you mentioned about Charlie, how he's upset some fans in your fan base, because there is a theory, and I live outside of Sunderland these days, and I've heard a lot of theories going, "Oh, you just didn't like him because he's a Etonite Southerner telling you how to run a Northern football club." So it's interesting that, in an area where there might be a few Etonites that support your club and a few people that are definitely from the south, he still managed to upset people. Do you know what I mean? With a very different mindset. So it's maybe it's not all Sunderland fans are that bad after all, and we're actually nice people.
Well, it's funny. I think somebody looked at. I think we're one of the only football clubs that's in an area that's both Labour and Remain voting, in Brexit terms. I think there's often a perception of Oxford as posh Southerners, all wearing tweed and that sort of stuff. But which we've kind of taken. We haven't done it for a few years, but there used to be a Tweed Army away day where everyone dressed in tweed for an away game. But it's a working class city. Yes, there's the university, but there's what's known as town and gown, where the town is the people that live there and work. We've got a car factory. It is a working class, and very much certainly East Oxford, where the ground is, very much a Labour stronghold. And then you've got the gown, which is the centre of the city and the beautiful buildings, but the two muddle along, and I think without the university, we'd be a town or a city that not many people would have heard about, really. The university is very much what the city is about, and we realise that. But the fan base is very much drawn from. It's a county town as well, a county club. There's lots of town myself. I'm sort of about 10 or 12 miles east of Oxford, but sort of Abingdon and Banbury and Bicester and Witney and places like that. The support is drawn from all around the county. So there's a few sort of Charlies at our ground, in our fan base as well, but not as many as you think.
I love how you said a few Charlies, but like everyone has this visualization of exactly what you mean immediately. I mean, you potentially makes a bit more sense and why it's upset people, because I think it's Charlie, with all due respect, will say what he thinks, but sometimes what he thinks just isn't what anyone else thinks. But nonetheless, one man that we both love and we've discussed numerous times that has a connection to both of us. I feel like I know the answer to this, but which player you're going to be looking out for on Saturday and which one worries you? I know the answer. I just have to ask the question.
Well, Chris Maguire. I think he's one of those players that we like. He cemented himself in our affections with games against Swindon, and they're obviously our big rival. You've got your own rivalries, but he not only played well in those games, but deliberately wound up their players. And there's a great photograph of him after a game we'd won away at their place, where he's doing the sort of the rubbing the eyes kind of crying thing at one of their players. He was a bit upset, and it's kind of his sort of performances in those games over a sort of 18-month period really made us love him, and he is one to watch, because regardless of how he might be playing in a season, he's got the ability with a free kick or a turn to just do something special. So he will be one. We'll be watching him for both reasons. One, because it's Chris Maguire and we love him, and one because actually he could win the game for you.
Yeah, you know what? I think I echo exactly the same with Chris Maguire. He came to us from Bury, obviously, and I've got to be honest, we were all a bit like free transfer from Bury. Oh, bloody hell, we really are League One. But with Chris Maguire, especially the past sort of 6 months of football, not so much the last 6 months because that's been COVID related. He's dragged us out of the shit so often, and he dragged us out of the shit again on Saturday. And to be honest, the first sort of 60 minutes, he misplaced about 7 or 8 passes, and you thought, what's he on today? But then he pops up and bangs one in. He's got. I find it very strange that Chris Maguire has never had that much of a successful championship career, because he is to me, he would no problem fit into a championship team. Lower end, I'm not saying he'd be like a league winner, but he'd be one player I'd like to take on board. But the reason we all love him is because he's a grade A shithouse, and we all know that. That's the best thing about him. Yeah. So to kind of finish off, I always ask, but I suppose we've got to go for predictions time. I'll give mine first because I never normally do that. I'm going to go with, and it'll probably not surprise you, but 1-1.
I was thinking, before you said that, I was thinking I'd settle for 1-1, and it seems to be, the default result between our teams. And based on what we did Saturday, I think that would be a good result for us at the moment. Let's get a point on the board and move on from there. But yeah, it'll be a tough game. I'm looking forward to it. It'll be a good game.
Yeah, no, absolutely. We've got a really tough run in. We've got yourselves away. We've got Peterborough coming up. So we've got games against teams that we expect to be there or thereabouts. So I think probably with you losing on Saturday, with us drawing a game that we should be looking to win on Saturday, we're probably both looking to it as to set a market down. But because we're both looking to set a market down, that's why it's going to be 1-1 written all over it, isn't it? It's going to be happy in a way, but then unhappy in another way. But Si, always got to catch up as always. Thanks for coming on and giving us a lowdown. I hope you don't have a good Saturday. I've got to be honest, because obviously you're playing our team.
Same with you.
No, I've got to take it back. But absolutely, mate. But appreciate you coming on and thanks very much.
Thanks for inviting me on. Good luck.
No problem.